Welcome back to Required Reading. We're continuing our reading of Ghostbusters The Return. Chapter 5. Even back in the days when the Ghostbusters headquarters was still a fire station, the block had rarely been host to such excitement. The mayor stood in front of the large bay doors, flanked by the Ghostbusters and his usual entourage. Beyond them was the crowd of reporters, with their microphones, cameras, and broadcast vans. Beyond that, the crowd multiplied with curious onlookers who'd been drawn by either the media circus, the rumors of the morning's events, or just a bit of free entertainment and a chance to sneak a peek into the background on the TV news.
Another piece of evidence,
the mayor was saying,
of the effectiveness of our campaign against quality afterlife crimes. I'm especially glad to announce the safe rescue of these children without the loss of a single life. As you all know, I have always been devoted to promoting the well-being of our children, because children are our future.
The mayor wrapped up his statement.
That's about it. So if there are any other questions...
A flurry of hands went up among the crowd of press people. Does this mean there are more of these things in the sewers? One asked.
We haven't seen any signs of it. Still, in the interest of public safety, I've ordered the DPW to check every sewer drain throughout the 5 boroughs. They expect to finish the job in under 5 months.
Will there be any school closings for fear of future attacks? Another asked.
No. At this point, we have no reason to think this was anything other than an isolated incident.
Has PETA or the SPCA verified that the alligators were handled humanely?
I can assure you that no animals, living or dead, were harmed in this incident.
Can we get a first-person account from one of the Ghostbusters?
Why, sure, said the mayor. Boys?
Venkman moved eagerly towards the microphones. As he passed Mayor Lipinski, the mayor whispered in an almost friendly warning.
Remember, make me look good now.
Venkman stepped forward and smiled for the cameras. Freshly showered and wearing a newly pressed set of coveralls, he pulled himself up to his full height and tried his best to look every inch the hero. I won't lie to you. Things got a little hairy today, he said in his most sincere voice. But everyone came through it okay. The kids are safe. The ghosts are under wraps. And as far as these kids' families are concerned, as far as we're concerned, that's the bottom line. As long as the safety of this city is threatened, someone's going to have to put himself on the line to protect it. The battle needs to be fought right here in the streets. And it needs to be fought from the highest offices in City Hall, too. The mayor smiled to himself. Venkman had indeed managed to find a way to bring this around to a plug for him. As tenuous as the link might have been, Venkman did it in a way that probably didn't sound too terribly strained. He still wasn't pleased about signing that lousy contract, but maybe the deal was beginning to pay dividends after all. Lipinski started to take a step forward to rejoin Venkman at the mic. That's why, Venkman told the reporters, I've decided to run for the office of mayor of the greatest city in the world, that tarnished but beautiful lady, New York City. The crowd exploded into chaos. There was a roar of noise as 24 reporters shouted out questions at the same time. Flashbulbs were popping all over the place. With no warning whatsoever, a routine press conference had erupted into a major scoop. The mayor's jaw dropped. What did Venkman think he was doing? Dr. Venkman, shouted out one of the reporters. When did you declare your candidacy? Just now, he replied with a smile. Weren't you paying attention? Dr. Venkman, yelled another. What ticket are you running on? The New York State Independent Party, along with my good friend and future deputy mayor, Winston Zedmore. There was a flurry of flashbulbs as Winston waved a little awkwardly to the cameras. How do you stand on public transportation? Well, usually I hold the pole in my left hand, Venkman said. to keep me steady when the train stops.
You think you can win?
I wouldn't be doing this if I thought I'd lose. Venkman gestured for the news people to settle down and put his sincere face back on. Let's get serious here for a minute, people. Yes, I am a candidate for the mayor, and yes, I am planning to win. I think the people of this fine city are tired of putting up with the same old political machine. I think they're ready for new blood and a new attitude. I think they're ready for someone who won't play politics, who'll do what it takes to get the job done. Dr. Venkman! Dr. Venkman! The mayor finally managed to push his way to the front and place himself between Venkman and the crowd. He forced a smile.
Sorry, boys. That's all we have time for.
Gee, I can hang out for a while, said Venkman. I don't have anywhere to go. Lipinski turned towards him, the forced smile still on his lips, but his eyes weren't smiling.
Some of us have cities to run, and some of us should be off chasing ghosts.
Mr. Mayor, called one of the reporters, how do you feel about Dr. Venkman's candidacy?
Well, boys, I always enjoy a little competition. Maybe one of these days I'll find some.
The reporters chuckled appreciatively.
I'm always in favor of people trying to improve themselves. Unfortunately, I think Dr. Venkman will find that the people of New York are smart enough to value the voice of experience and a mayor who knows what he's doing. You can't fix the school board with a ray gun. Still, he continued, that's one of the great things about America. Anyone can run for office, no matter how unqualified they are. I'll offer Dr. Venkman my deepest condolences later after the voters have spoken. But in the meantime, at least it looks like we've got ourselves a horse race.
Lipinski shook Venkman's hand for the cameras. As the photographers snapped away, capturing the moment for posterity, he muttered under his breath,
I'll break you for this.
Arnie, Venkman muttered back, did anyone ever tell you that you're cute when you're desperate? He announced? How could he announce? Ted Golden paced back and forth in Milken's richly paneled office, gesturing wildly. He's not even on the ballot yet. I'm still working on his message points. Milken sat back in his chair behind his desk, watching an all-news channel. He took in the live feed of the press conference with satisfaction. Relax, Ted, he said. This is a minor hiccup at most. There's no real harm done. Relax? No harm done? 5 minutes into this campaign, and he's already a loose cannon. That unpredictability is part of the idea, remember? He's not a politician. Besides, Milken pointed at the television screen, which showed a close-up of Mayor Lipinski. Milken could almost see the veins bulging in his forehead. Isn't it worth it to see all this happen during Lipinski's own press conference? Golden stopped pacing for a moment and looked at the screen. A smile almost crossed his lips. But then he threw his arms up with a growl that was a mixture of frustration and resignation. I'd better go finish those message points before he gets into even bigger trouble. He stalked out of the office, shaking his head. Milken studied the image of Venkman and Lipinski on the television screen. This could work. They might actually win this thing. Venkman and Zedmore's celebrity could carry the day more effectively than talent or experience ever could. Voters liked the image of someone strong enough to protect them, but the election wasn't over yet. In fact, it had hardly begun. While the candidates might be the public face of the campaign, there was an awful lot that still had to be done behind the scenes. Milken switched off the television, rose from his desk, and walked down the hall to a large open area where a handful of aides sat at desks making phone calls. Campaign manager John Fielding was crouched over one of the desks, giving instructions to the aide who was sitting there. How are we doing? Milken asked the room in general. Great, Fielding replied. I sent an aide over to file the initial paperwork on Venkman and Zedmore. Fortunately, we had already had the campaign finance report done, so we just had to fill in their names. I take it you heard that Venkman announced? I heard something to that effect, yes. Fielding grinned. Did you see Lipinski's reaction? I enjoyed every minute of it. How are we doing on the petitions? In order to get their candidates on the ballot, they were going to have to get more than 7,000 people to sign the necessary petition. One of the aides covered the mouthpiece of her phone so that she could answer. Amazing. It's only been a few minutes, but the volunteers from the field have been calling in to say that they've got over 300 signatures already. Impressive. How are they doing it so fast? Strategic placement, said Fielding. We've got a few dozen just by sending them over to the school with the alligators during pickup time. Another 100 from the crowd at the mayor's press conference. Milken smiled at the irony of that. The rest I already sent out for places where I figure people would want to see a couple of Ghostbusters in City Hall. Movie theaters, showing action films, science fiction bookstores, places like that. And we haven't even started on the boroughs yet. Excellent. At this rate, it's conceivable that we might even be able to file the petitions by next week. Meanwhile, Stu's working on the unions, trying to drum up support there. Ted's working on the message points. So I've heard. I'm drafting a first pass on their platforms, and we've got Venkman and Zedmore coming in tomorrow for photos at the starter training. Milken clapped him on the shoulder. Great work. We're on our way. It had been a rough rehearsal that afternoon. The piece itself wasn't particularly difficult. It wasn't the sort of thing that a room full of beginners could handle, but the New York Philharmonic had performed music that was far more complex. No, what made it rough for Dana was the fact that she had spent at least an extra hour trying to deal with a perfectionist conductor and a first oboe with a head cold. The longer than usual session meant that Dana was late for picking up her son Oscar from daycare. It would have been nice if she could have called Peter, or even Janine, and asked one of them to get Oscar for her. But Dana still hadn't started returning Peter's calls yet, so doing something like that probably would have caused more problems than it would have solved. It also would have been nice if she could have just asked Oscar's father to take care of his son, but the last she'd heard, her ex was off on an extended tour of Europe, performing a series of one-man minimalistic symphonies. Fortunately, it wasn't the first time that work was going to keep a parent from getting to the daycare center on time. A quick call, and one of the assistant teachers assured her that it would be no problem to keep him for an extra period of time. Of course, it also got her yelled at by the conductor for taking valuable time to make the call, but it was a small price for a mother to pay. By the time Dana was finally released, ran cross town to get Oscar, stopped off for groceries, and caught a subway home, it was already well into dinner time, and she hadn't even begun to cook yet. With Oscar in one arm and a couple of bags of groceries in the other, Dana fumbled her keys free from her bag and somehow managed to open the door. Oscar wasn't exactly crying at the moment, but he was hungry enough to be pretty grumpy by now. Eat. Eat. I know, kiddo, I know. I want to eat too. Just another minute, she told him, bouncing him up and down as she spoke in an unnaturally happy tone. We're home. Here we are. I'll give you some dinner in a minute, okay? Okay? Swooping through the apartment, she set the groceries down on the kitchen counter, dropped Oscar into his high chair, returned to the living room to shrug off her coat and toss it over the arm of a chair, and hit the button on her answering machine on her way back into the kitchen. There was a beep, and a familiar filtered voice filled the apartment. Dana, it's your mother. When is that adorable grandson of mine coming for a visit? Not to mention that boyfriend of yours. Not that I'm pushing, dear, but you're still not getting any younger. Well, call me. Another beep. Hi, it's Peter. Call number 17. I'm a dope, but a cute one. Please call back. Bye. Dana rummaged through the refrigerator. There had to be something she could get Oscar that she didn't have to make fresh. She picked up a half-empty container of leftover dim sum and considered it briefly. Nah, he'd never touch it. Beep! Number 18. Did I mention I'm a jerk? Please call. Bye. Beep. Me again. You really gotta call me. I've got some big news this time. You're not gonna believe it. Call me, okay? Dana smiled and shook her head as she continued to dig through the fridge. Right. Big news, she thought. Probably, we belong together. Bologna? A half-eaten stuffed cabbage? She was starting to seriously consider feeding Oscar chocolate for dinner when she spotted the perfect thing. Beep. Hello, Dana. This is Egon Spangler speaking. Peter would like me to tell you that he truly does have important news to share with you, and that What was it? Right. That I am serving as an independent third party to verify that this isn't some cheap scam to get you on the phone. Please call him so we can get this over with. Thank you. Despite herself, she smiled. As she dropped some leftover pasta onto the tray of Oscar's high chair and blew a stray lock of hair off her face, Dana wondered whether she'd been too hasty with Peter. Not just because she could use an extra pair of hands to help with her errands, but because enough time had passed to let her cool off and remind herself that it was true. He really was kind of cute. And a dope, she told Oscar. He munched happily on his pasta in reply. Dana filled a sippy cup with tap water and set it down beside the pasta on his tray. That should keep him busy for a few minutes, she thought. She took advantage of the brief respite to finally take off his jacket. She went inside and hung the 2 coats in the closet beside the front door. She started back towards the kitchen and then, almost as an afterthought, flipped on the television so she could listen to the news while unpacking the rest of her groceries. Returning to the kitchen, Dana asked Oscar, "What do you say, kiddo? Ready to keep the title of best informed 2-year-old on the block?" She returned to pull groceries out of the bag, taking care to bypass the potato chips that were near the top of one. She knew that if Oscar saw the chips, he'd refuse to eat anything else. Instead, she took out a banana and held it out towards him. "Banana?" "Yeah, nana," he said, with his mouth full. Dana peeled the banana, broke off the top half, and handed it to him. She took a bite from the other half, watching Oscar eat with pleasure. She exhaled through her nose as she chewed, finally letting her body relax. Slowly, she became aware that Peter's voice was filling the apartment again. "That's funny," she told Oscar. "Did I bump into the answering machine?" As Peter's voice was replaced by a reporter's, though, she realized that the source was someplace else. Curious, she stuck her head into the living room to look at the television and see what was going on. She stared at the screen. No, she thought. It couldn't be.
Geezer. No need to holler, oh infinite master of trepidation. I'm right here beside you.
Xanthanor flexed every one of his many claws. His tail swept slowly from side to side, then suddenly whipped out to shatter a rock outcropping that stood behind him. Giesel threw his arms over his head to protect himself against the ebony rubble that rained down on the barren plain.
Attend, Giesel, gaze in abject awe. Already I begin to succeed. Already I can feel my power beginning to grow. I am so pleased to hear it, O venerable overlord of fright. With every strike executed by my minions, the fear increases. The barrier between worlds weakens. It is only a matter of time until the earth shall fall beneath the shadow of Xanthanor.
Giesel started to edge away from his master before Xanthanor could bring down another outcropping.
Very good, O formidable ruler of misgiving. I'll go prepare for your final triumph.
Xanthanor reached out and stopped him.
Patience, Giesel. The time is not yet upon us. but it shall come.
Giesel managed to croak out a response, despite Xanthanor's hand wrapped around his throat. Not yet?
No, the prophecy has not yet been met. My power grows, but slowly.
I guess that's why my head's still attached.
Huh? Ah,
Xanthanor released his grip as though he hadn't even noticed what his hand was doing. As Giesel gasped for breath, Xanthanor continued without so much as a pause.
for now I regret to say that I must content myself with localized excursions. Yet each individual's terror adds to my might. The fear of one fuels assaults on 10. The fear of 10 fuels assaults on hundreds. The scope of our efforts shall expand. The fear shall multiply, and my power shall thrive.
Giesel cleared his throat and took a deep breath. Works for me. It had been a long night and morning by the time Rudy Hamilton dragged himself back into the lobby of his hotel. He'd long since lost track of the number of bars he'd visited over the course of the night. Through it all, he hadn't managed to pick up a single woman, but he had much better luck picking up glasses of scotch. Rudy had stuck around long enough to hit closing time at several nearby bars, then moved on to close the after-hour clubs as well. Now that morning had come, he made his way to the elevator, stumbling a bit along the way. He hit the up button and ran his hands through various pockets, searching for his room key as he glanced idly around the lobby. He could see that the foot traffic was light at this early hour of the morning. Just as Rudy found his key, something caught his eye. Across the lobby, the door to the hotel bar was ajar, and the lights were on. Could it be? Was the bar open at this hour? The doors of the elevator parted as the car arrived with an electronic bell tone. Rudy looked down at the room key in his hand, then back at the door that led to the bar. Well, I guess I could just check whether they're open, he thought, just out of curiosity. Pocketing the key, he headed over to stick his head inside the open door. Sure enough, a bartender was standing behind the bar, polishing glasses with a white cloth. There was only one patron inside, an attractive, languid woman who was sitting at the far end of the bar. He pushed the door open a bit more and stepped inside. The bartender looked up and saw him approaching. "Can I help you?" Rudy climbed onto a stool. "Scotch water, please. Neat." The bartender smiled, but shook his head. "Sorry, we're not open. I'm just cleaning up." To punctuate his point, he gestured towards the chairs that were stacked upside down and on top of tables around the room. "You does serving?" "Can't. It's not legal this early. I could lose my license." Rudy looked over at the drink that was nestled in the hand of the woman at the end of the bar. She looked back at him, the corner of her mouth curling into a lazy smile. "Not even the wood last night cap?" he asked the bartender. "Or boarding cap? Or whatever?" "Sorry," the bartender replied with a shrug. "Course, if you were to help yourself to something, I couldn't do anything about it now, could I?" Rudy caught the bartender's knowing smile and nodded. He started to ease himself off the stool, but the woman at the end of the bar raised a hand. "Don't bother yourself," she said, in a sort of throaty voice that often came with a little too much alcohol. "I'll get it for you. I need a refill anyway." "Thanks," said Rudy. Watching her get off her stool and move around to the back of the bar, Rudy guessed that she'd had quite a few refills already. But then again, after the night he'd had, he supposed he wasn't really in a position to judge. "Scotch and water, right?" "Yeah."
Thanks.
Still, despite her blurry-eyed look, Rudy had to admit that she was a good-looking woman. Long hair and pale skin. Maybe a little too pale, but no big deal. That was offset by a silky black dress, cut low across the front and slit high up the side, revealing just enough to keep him interested. He glanced at himself in the mirror behind the bar and straightened his hair with his hand. Here we are. She came back around the front of the bar with a pair of amber drinks in her hands. She set one glass on the bar and sat down beside him. Rudy raised his glass towards her in a toast and looked deeply into her eyes. To early risers, he said. Or late biggoers, she said, slurring her words a bit. They took a swallow from their respective drinks. So, Rudy said, are you staying in the hotel? Mm-hmm. In New York for work or pleasure? Oh, working, unfortunately. She took another sip. Then, in a meaningful tone, she added, Not that there's anything wrong with mixing a little pleasure, too. I couldn't agree more. Really? She said. And you? Are you here with anyone? Bingo, Rudy thought. Nope, just me. Finished off my sales quota yesterday, so now I'm all by my lonesome, looking for a little fun before I head home this afternoon. Lucky you. I've got miles to go before I hit my quota. Poor baby. What's your line? It's hard to describe. Technical, huh? Something like that. But I could show you if you'd like to come up to my room. Rudy's heart was pounding in his chest. I thought you'd never ask. She turned to the bartender. I don't suppose you could be a dear and send room service to room 1218. We're going to need some ice, and a lot of it. Rudy's eyebrows rose. Oh, really? He wasn't quite sure what she had in mind, but he quickly decided that he'd like to find out. The next few hours could turn out to be very interesting. The bartender chuckled and reached for the phone beneath the bar. Sure, no problem. She eased herself off the bar stool, brushing against Rudy as she rose. He was right behind her. Hang on a minute, he said. He pulled a $20 bill from his pocket and dropped it onto the bar beside the empty glass. Oops, he said, sliding the bill towards the bartender with a wink. I think I dropped some cash. I'll keep an eye out for it, the bartender replied. He tossed Rudy a little two-fingered salute before slipping the bill into his pocket. Rudy turned back to his new friend. He slid his right hand into her left, their fingers intertwining. Shall we? Mm-hmm. The two of them walked to the door hand in hand. As they passed a tall window, they were enveloped in the warm glow of the shaft of sunlight. Rudy closed his eyes momentarily against the glare. As a result, he didn't notice the other effect that the light had on his companion. It turned her body translucent. Perhaps more important, Rudy also didn't notice the other change that was gradually taking place as they left the bar. While he held her left hand, the fingers on her right hand began to glisten. Slowly they grew long, hard, and metallic, until they resembled a set of razor-sharp blades. By the way, she purred, how are your kidneys? My kidneys? They're fine, he replied. Why do you ask?